Hello, everybody. Another episode of Seize Your Business. I'm Jim Waszak from Success Enhancement and Kevin O'Flaherty from O'Flaherty Law. And today we have an interesting guest, Bob Podgorski. Bob is a friend of mine and I've known for probably about 10 years. And he runs job search support groups for the village of Elk Grove Village and Schaumburg. And today we're going to talk a little bit about establishing your identity as a consultant. A lot of people would like to have a business of their own, and sometimes you can just show your expertise, and that turns into a business. So, Bob, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you both. I appreciate being here.
So tell us a little bit about your background, Bob.
Well, 38 years in senior human resources positions, and through part of my career, I had my own consulting firm, and more recently, over the last 5 years, reignitioned that and had the opportunity to provide consulting services for corporations, companies, not-for-profit organizations, and started working with the Chambers of Commerce, doing work with small businesses to help them to do a better job with their businesses. And then the Small Business Development organization that's part of SBA asked me to come in and do a seminar on consulting as a career option. And I've been doing that now on a regular basis for the SBDC office that's at Harper College.
So you're consulting on how to be a consultant. That's pretty meta.
Interesting, yes.
So, Bob, let's say a person is, for whatever reason, thinking they want to do something on their own. What are kind of some of the things they should think about in determining if they want to be an independent consultant?
Sure. First of all, it's pretty important that they have a brand, that they understand what it is that they're selling, that the service that they're providing, the consulting activities that they're providing has a audience, so they need to know that there is a market. They need to do a little bit of market research to determine that. And then, of course, they need to have a pitch that provides the value-added certainly for the customer or client that they might be pitching to. So those are kind of the starting points, is what is it that I have that I can sell effectively? What kind of value can I bring? And is there an audience out there that would actually pay for this service?
Okay.
Pitch seems to be the toughest part of that. I have friends who have kind of dabbled in trying to get into consulting, and they've not moved forward with it because they've sat down with a couple of people and people who really needed their services, but they ended up not hiring them because they didn't have, whatever materials together that they needed to show a concrete plan, and it just seemed a little bit ephemeral to pay money for.
Exactly, and part of the problem that a lot of consultants have, or people who want to get into consulting, is that they may have a technical or a particular area of specialty that they might be able to sell, and that may be of interest in terms of a client buying those services, but when it comes to the pitch itself, they don't know quite how to do it. Most of the consultants that I've seen who are starting out in business need help and guidance into how to put together an effective proposal. That's really a very concrete thing that you can place in the hands of a client that they can look at, they can mull over, they can create their questions, come back to you with those questions, and then in your answers show them even greater expertise. So it's in that proposal stage that I see a number of consultants failing, or unfortunately not getting the level of business that they potentially could based on the skills that they have and the specialties that they have. So it's in that disposal.
So where might somebody go to learn or see some templates of how do they learn to write a good proposal?
Well, there's a number of books out there. I always start out by saying if there's one place that you can go, it's certainly the public library. And every public library has a business section where you can find one book after another on consulting. But part and parcel of the problem is that many of those books are very complicated. They really get into such phenomenal detail that you would need to be in a consulting capacity that has 15 consultants or 20 consultants to utilize that level of proposal. But there's a much more simplified approach that consultants can use. A simplified approach really starts with an exceptional statement of work. That statement of work is basically what you have learned from listening and talking with the client about what their needs are, what their problems are, what the problems are that they perceive in terms of the issues on the table, and then being able to communicate that in an effective form within that proposal, so that when they look at it, they could say, "Yeah, right. That's exactly what's happening. That's what I'm trying to solve." And they get excited just by looking at the statement of work, understanding that you now know what they're faced with, and you now may be that solution for them. Then you need to be able to provide them with the credentials. So part of the proposal is your credentials, to make sure that your credentials match what it is that the problem is you're going to be solving. And another part of it is time and cost. You want to be able to understand the ramifications of the problem. It's like project planning, Jim. And Kevin, if you were to lay out a program of some kind or a project of some kind, what you're going to look at is you're going to look at a series of things. You're going to be looking at what resources are you going to need. You're going to be looking at what equipment, what size facilities, what amenities, desk, chair, whatever it is you're going to need to help solve the problem. You're going to be looking at the various aspects of coordinating within the organization. There are a whole series of things that have to come into play before you can give the client an answer as to how long this is going to take. But once you know how long it's going to take, then it's a matter of understanding how much you charge for your services. And that's the second biggest problem that consultants have, is what do I charge for the services that I provide?
To back up a little bit, sorry to cut you off.
No, that's okay.
I got cut off by better people than you. So don't worry about it.
I've often been in a position where I've been looking desperately to hire a good consultant, and I've never hired one. And the problem that I had was with the statement of work. You know, what you said that spoke to me is that the consultants that I've met with, ready to hire them, that I haven't ended up hiring, basically didn't boil it down. I had some very specific issues that I wanted dealt with. I was willing to pay for that and pay a good rate for it, but I didn't want to pay just a random retainer and not knowing what or just a flat monthly fee and not know what I was getting out of that. So if you as a potential client of a consultant, that statement of work, you know, if they had taken maybe an hour to put that together as opposed to just kind of throwing me their, you know, regular form, there's certainly several times where I would have hired a consultant if they had just been specific about exactly what problems they were going to solve.
Yeah, and that's what I've found as I've done this consulting as a career option or as a small business program for various organizations, is that those people who want to make that leap into entrepreneurial activities oftentimes just don't quite know how to pull it all together. And while this would seem like an administrative task, there's a lot of thinking that has to go into it. And you have to also understand the terrain or the environment that you're going into. Because while you can talk about the statement of work, one statement of work may be the same as for a small company as it is for a large company, in other words, clients, okay? But the nuances come in terms of the size of the organization, the communications links within the organization, how complex their internal structure is. There's a number of different factors that have to come into play when you're providing that statement of work. And so it's not just a matter of restating the problem that the individual has. It's also taking into account the organizational environment, if you will, that you have to get into that statement of work as well, so that when they read it, there's a realism to their specific environment. And that's kind of a nuance, if you will, where the statement of work sometimes fails.
You know, I can relate to that. I can tell you a story. Very early in my consulting career, I got hired by a company, and the father, who was still kind of the informal leader of the company, he wanted me to help his son be more effective in his day-to-day duties. His son wanted me to work on a financial planning tool that their various locations could use. So we did the latter, and of course the father wasn't happy because it was something totally different. So I think part of the reason why that good proposal or statement of work is clear, because then everybody knows what's actually going on.
Well, you bring up a good point, and that's the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? And sometimes there's a lot of ambiguity. That's part of consulting, is to be able to deal with ambiguity, because there will always be some level of ambiguity somewhere within trying to solve that problem. But nonetheless, the issue is, who are the stakeholders? Who are the people who are involved, both directly and peripherally, to feeling the pain of this particular problem, and have a stake in the solution to that problem, because you really need to talk to them as well. You need to understand where they're coming from, and you drew a terrific analogy with your example, and that was that you had two people, both who are looking at something, and one wanting this and one wanting that. And I had a similar situation. The owner brought me in to do a particular job, and as I was in the process of doing that job, the son, who was the president, who would eventually inherit the company, learned about the assignment, and he had totally different perspective on things. And as a result of not understanding that he was a stakeholder, I wound up losing a client that was a very good client of mine. But then eventually Papa retired, and his son took over. But again, you have to understand as much as you can who all the stakeholders are.
You know, people, I think, like hearing success stories. Do you have one you could share this as somebody who got into this and it really worked out well for him or her?
Yeah, the wonderful thing is that I've had the privilege, and I really feel quite good about it. I've launched a number of careers in consulting, and there is one individual by the name of Dave Amos, and Dave is a good friend of mine now. We became acquainted through...
That's not the guy from famous Amos Cooking.
No, it's not.
I thought I could get free chocolate.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
That would be great.
But Dave came to me and said that he was moving away from doing some of the corporate kind of things and wanted to get into consulting. He attended one of my consulting as a career option workshops, and he did not get discouraged. And by the way, I try to discourage people within the first 5 minutes. And if I do, they're better off. If I don't, then they've got a task ahead of them, but it can be a lot of fun. Dave was one of those. He wanted to take it to the next level. Dave was a specialist in safety, and he launched his safety consulting business and safety training consulting business, inevitably being picked up by the National Safety Council here in Chicago. That sends him all over the United States doing training programs in various venues of everything from vehicle training to safety training to workplace training and just a variety of things. As a result of having done that for various organizations, other organizations have now called him and asked him to come in and do special programs for them. So he has launched his own business. He did so not at a tender age. Dave was over 50 when he did this, and he is the most joyous individual that I know, based on the fact that he has now realized his dream of being an independent consultant in demand, and having something that he knows exceptionally well, having branded himself in that field, and being able to sell it to clients.
I like that phrase, "in demand." I think that's what everybody
Yes.
everybody shoots for. So
You mentioned you try to discourage people within the first 5 minutes or so,
Yes.
and I'd imagine that it's a really tough industry to start getting into before you've built a client base.
Oh, yes.
'Cause, I mean, in my industry, I have like a 75 or 80% conversion rate on my free consultations, and that's a half hour of my time. But for a consultant, they not only have to, the clients are a little harder to find, they're fewer and far between, and then once they find those clients, after investing a bunch of time in that, then they have to meet with them probably several times and put a lot of work into preparing this proposal, and the conversion rate probably isn't all that high.
Well, that's part of what I go through in the presentation that I do, which is about a 3 hour for the Small Business Development Council. When I do it for them, the first 5 minutes, one of the things that I talk about is be prepared, first of all, for no income in the first year, because you're really kicking your business off. You're you're trying to get some recognition out there. You're trying to identify your market and penetrate your market. You're trying to get that visibility. The next thing, of course, is the variable income. Even once you start getting clients, your income is not going to be steady. Your income is going to be high on 1 month and down the next, and it may not come back up for another 5 or 6 months. And so there is a lot of this feast or famine, particularly in the first year of operation, that you have to be cognizant of. You can't just simply walk into it and say, well, today I'm going to be a consultant and start earning money immediately. There's very few people who do that. So it's really a business that has a lot of issues associated with it. But if you can get through that and become successful at it, it can be one of the greatest things in the world. And having my own business in consulting has provided me with an opportunity to do exactly what I love. And when we're doing something we love, we're not really working.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So other than the statement of work, and you gave us some of the elements of a good proposal, you talked about setting fee structures. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. It's first of all, it's not an easy thing.
Before you answer, let me just interject, because perhaps you could comment on the 3 different approaches I've seen. One is an hourly rate, one is a project price, and one is a retainer. So I know those are things that people usually think about.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you talk about pricing, you're talking about a variety of things. And so it might be time and cost associated with it. But it also can be a retainer with a kicker at the end. So there's a number of different ways that people can structure how to provide the payments, but it's what are the payments? What is the amount that you should charge for your services? And the only way that you can really determine what that is to try to get a handle on what the competition is doing. So one place to start is, let's say there's a corporation and a corporation hires these kinds of people. There is a certain wage structure for that size company and that kind of environment. And now you understand, if you were an employee, this is what you would make, plus about another 25% on benefits and other kinds of things. So you basically have some structure there. Then you put that aside, and then you go out and you try to find competitors that would be similar, and try to determine what their costing and their pricing is. And then you can put that down. And now you have basically 2 things that you can look at that give you some kind of an idea. There's also, most people who get into consulting are in a profession that they've done before, perhaps for a corporation. And as a result of that, they could go back to friends and associates and supervisors and leaders in those corporations they formerly came out of and say to them, does this sound like the right price if you were to hire a consultant doing this kind of work? And they can give you some feedback. And now you put that on the table and you regurgitate that along with everything else, and out will come some type of fee structure. Now, I always tell consultants that they can't look at cost or price alone. They really need to look at a number of different factors when they decide to take a job or go after a job. And so one of those things is this an opportunity to learn something? Is this an opportunity to grow in your profession, in your consulting capacity? Will you use a new software package, as an example? Will you be in a new environment which will tax your problem solving or stretch your problem solving and give you the opportunity to now fill in a blank, perhaps, that was in your consulting cadre of services. And then lastly, will this assignment provide you with a plethora of new contacts and new connections in a new industry?
Sure.
And so as you look at your pricing, look at some of these other things of what it gives you in terms of helping to build your business and basically grow your capability in your ability to be able to serve customers and clients perhaps on a more broader basis, which then gives you more marketing opportunities. Okay. So that's, I mean, it's a long answer, I'm sorry, but that's the way I would do it.
Do you find that consultants are more successful when they have a written, basically, program that they're going to take a client through? So, like, when I've seen people that I was really considering signing up with, it was because they had here's our process, you know, and it was in writing. It wasn't something that they were experimenting with me on, and I'm going to take you through this process, and each stage is going to cost so much. It's kind of like a statement of work, but it's something where the client sees a roadmap.
Right, phased.
Is that something that you highly recommend doing, or is that different based on the industry?
No, actually, it's 50-50. It's a two-sided coin. For some organizations, having that kind of thing is exactly what they need, exactly what they want. In other cases, the organization looks at it and says, "Hey, wait a minute, we're unique here. We're not a cookie-cutter situation," and so. The thing that I always look at is, and recommend to consultants, and I get many calls from consultants who get into these situations. They say, I've got a client, but there's some uniquenesses here. There's some things that, and there's a lot of ambiguity that I'm not quite getting all of the information, or they know what the problem is, but they don't know where the cause of the problem stems from. And I'm going to have to get in there, and I'm going to have to dig below the surface, and I'm going to have to do that, and so on. And so a cookie cutter type of program may fit that or may not fit that, where another organization has a pretty much black and white problem, and a cookie cutter situation could fit that. So it's really you almost have to go by each assignment and look at each assignment as a unique entity and see what it's going to take for you to get to the point of resolution. But there's one other thing that's important for consulting, and maybe this is kind of like the final point, and that is that the solution that you provide has to be of a level that can be realistically implemented.